Thanks. For this first talk, I'm really excited to present Hava Chaptoukaev and Maria Zuluaga. Hava is a third-year PhD student within Maria's research group at Eurecom in France, and Maria is an associate professor at Eurecom with an affiliate position within the School of Biomedical Engineering and Imaging Sciences at King's College London. They focus on developing novel machine learning methods from multimodal data that can be safely used to advance healthcare research and improve clinical practice. From an application standpoint, they aim to answer questions coming from neurovascular and cardiovascular imaging, as well as cancer research. Maria and Hava, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So thanks, Theo, Steph, Amelia, and Veronica for the invitation. So I'm Maria Zuluaga, and I'm here with Hava Chaptoukaev, who will start the presentation. So if we are successful, no, just start like this.
Hello. Can you hear me well?
Yes, all good.
Yes.
Okay. So first of all, thank you for inviting us today. I am Hava, and today Maria and I will be talking about acquiring, curating, and releasing a multimodal data set for stress detection. So we will start with a bit of motivation and context. Everyone experiences stress, but while a small amount of stress is necessary for functioning in daily life, negative stress can also be a triggering factor in many health-related issues. For example, it is very important in the well-being of children and young non-verbal patients with an autism spectrum disorder, or ASD. And the current clinical assessment of the stress-related issues in these patients is pretty challenging. It relies on standardized psychological tests or interviews with parents due to the difficulty of directly communicating with the patients. So as a result, the clinical records are often lacking objective and quantitative measurements. So today, with the rise of wearable sensors, we have an opportunity to collect physiological-based markers of stress while minimizing the interaction for these patients with the caregivers. Also, recording audio and video could provide elements of monitoring for the caregivers, and ultimately combining this data in multimodal analysis using, for example, AI, could allow us to move toward automated detection of stress in ASD patients. So for building automated models, in general, we need access to high-quality data sets, and it's even more important in e-health applications. But currently, there is a very few openly available stress-related data sets, and even less data sets that combine audio, video, and data recorded with wearable devices. So that's why we have introduced StressID, a multimodal data set that we have specifically designed to support the development of robust and reliable e-health tools for stress identification. So a data set like that, in theory, should be collected on a large and diverse population, integrate both physical and physiological components of stress, and also include a broad range of different responses to different kinds of stress. But in reality, now the existing data sets are often limited in size, as it is the case in data sets involving human data in general. They gather around 15 to 20 participants. They're also often recorded on male populations only. They often are unimodal or provide only physiological modalities, and they focus on very specific stressors or stress-inducing stimuli, for example, like in driving conditions or office work, so which makes them not generalizable and limits their usage in real life. So with StressID, we aim to bridge these gaps, and our data set uses a collection of wearable sensors to record the physiological responses to stress. We record ECGs, electrodermal activity, and respiration signals. that are coupled with synchronized videos of facial expressions and audio recordings. And with more than 39 hours of annotated data in total, this is one of the largest available datasets, well, multimodal datasets in this field. So to ensure that our dataset is as versatile as possible, we have designed carefully designed an experimental protocol that I describe here. So we use 11 tasks grouped into 4 blocks. We start with the guided breathing task that allows us to bring the participants to a neutral state. And we can later use those signals as a reference for a resting baseline to calibrate analysis and things like that. Then in the second and third block, we use 2 passive and 7 interactive stressors. So stressors meaning tasks that we have specifically designed to elicit stress responses. And we finish the experiments with a relaxation task of 5 minutes. So for example, the stressor tasks have been selected specifically to design different categories of stress. So for example, by asking the participants to watch emotion-inducing video clips, we aim to stimulate their audiovisual cortex. We also try to elicit, to increase the cognitive load of the participants in the interactive tasks by soliciting, for example, their attention, comprehension, math, and multitasking abilities. And lastly, we also try to elicit psychosocial stress by leveraging on public speaking as a stressor. So after each of the 11 tasks, we also ask 4 questions to the participants so that they provide us self-assessments. We first start by asking them to rate their perceived levels of stress and relaxation on 0 to 10 scales. And we also use the self-assessment mannequin so that they can provide insights into their emotional state during the tasks. So specifically, we ask them to rate their levels of balance that describe the levels of pleasantness or unpleasantness that they felt during the task, and their levels of arousal that describe how involved they felt in the task. So in total, we recorded 65 participants over sessions of 35 minutes. And the recorded population mainly consists of STEM students and workers aged between 21 and 55 years old. Among them, 18 were women and 47 were men. After collection, we also analyzed the distribution of the self-assessments that we collected across the dataset. And we have observed that we have high levels of arousal, which suggests that our experimental protocol was able to both elicit strong responses in the participant and involve them. And when looking at the joint distributions, we also observe a positive correlation between stress and arousal and relax and balance, which is in line with psychological studies today. And that suggests that the experimental conditions of our of StressID were reasonably close to real-life conditions. So after the acquisition, we curated all the data we collected. So we started by removing the recordings that were damaged during the acquisition. We also removed the video recordings of participants who chose not to make them publicly available. And then we split all of the 35-minute recordings into individual tasks, such that after the split, we obtain more than 19 hours of annotated physiological data, 15 hours of annotated videos, and 6 hours of annotated audio data. So overall, the design of StressID offers many possible use cases and applications. For example, it offers different types of learning pipelines. We can perform subject-specific learning or task-specific, where we choose to focus on one category of stressor rather than others, or modality-specific learning, where we choose to do unimodal analysis, focusing on only one modality. But because we offer multiple synchronized modalities, we can also do multimodal, cross-modal analysis and explore the relationships between physical and physiological modalities that often carry complementary information. And also because thanks to the rich self-assessments provided by the participants, we can also explore the relationships between emotion and stress. So to illustrate the potential of StressID, we proposed a very simple illustrative use case consisting in classifying whether a participant is stressed or not. So to do that, we designed a label for supervised learning using the self-assessments, where we took the stress 0 to 10 stress scale and just split at 5 to obtain the binary label. We then use this label to train supervised models for classifying whether the subject is stressed or not, using their physiological and physical modalities as input. So to do that, we have implemented several unimodal and multimodal baselines that are actually representative of the state of the art in the field and that can be used by future researchers as a reference point. So specifically, we extracted time, frequency, and entropy features from the physiological signals, action units from the videos, and acoustic features from the audio. And we fed them to multiple unimodal and multimodal machine learning models. So to evaluate the performances of this model, we have selected a subset of StressID that contains only tasks featuring all modalities. The results already clearly highlight the benefits of combining multiple sources of data in stress identification, and therefore highlights the advantages of a dataset such as StressID. And while this is just a simple illustrative application, the researchers who would like to use StressID actually have all the material necessary to perform more advanced analysis and that answer to their own research questions. So still, there are a few limitations that open to new research questions that we would like to discuss. So first, because of the ambulatory nature of our experiment, there might be more noise and artifacts in data recorded with wearable sensor than in the traditional clinical data sets. Second, as I have mentioned, we have missing modalities in StressID due to several factors. So for example, as I said, the participants could consent or not to share the identifying information, and as such, we don't have video for some of them. Also, some of the tasks we use, such as the guided breathing or watching videos, are non-verbal, and therefore we don't have an audio component for them, and several physiological signals were damaged. Third, despite our best efforts during recruitment, we still have a gender imbalance in the data set. And funnily enough, it is actually representative of the female to male ratio in STEM studies and work. And it is also, unfortunately, a very common issue in all data sets, human data collection. And lastly, even though we try to make the data set as diverse, as versatile as possible, it is still collected in a controlled environment with artificial stressors, meaning that it was designed specifically to elicit stress responses. And as such, there are maybe not 100% representative of situations that arise in real life. And on top of that, perception of stress and relaxation can vary a lot between one participant and the other, which at the end makes it that it might be hard to discriminate between a positive stress and a negative stress. So by discussing these aspects, what we would like to do is bring the attention of researchers onto those issues so that they can take them into account when designing their models to ensure that they are both reliable and robust. And this is all the more important as all these issues are actually pretty representative of what can arise in real world data. So yeah, we strongly encourage them to consider these issues as research questions entirely. So, for example, to handle noise and artifacts, it is obvious that researchers will need to adapt the existing learning pipelines that they have, that are usually computed on optimal, like on data recorded in optimal conditions. And they will have to make sure that the models they have are actually robust to this kind of perturbations. And this can be as simple as reviewing the cleaning phase that they have in the pipelines already in place. But for missing data, it can be less trivial. So in our previous experiment, we just focused on the subset of the data with no missing values. But this is pretty counterintuitive, as on the contrary, what we would like to do is utilize all the available records. So to do that, we need to take additional steps before computing the classical machine learning algorithms. And what we did is compute state-of-the-art models for handling missing values on the full data set and compare them to the results on the subsets that we have had before. And we have found that using methods as simple as imputing the missing values by the mean of the feature can already improve the results considerably. But given the sensitive nature of the data and the applications, we would like to encourage researchers to look for models that can avoid imputation and inherently handle the missing values. And we think the StressID dataset is a good support for that. We also performed a preliminary experiment to show the impact of an imbalanced dataset and the bias it introduces in the predictions. So what we did is that we selected a subset of the data where both female and male participants are represented equally. And we compared the baselines on this subset with the ones on the full data set that we had before. And we have found that by eliminating this imbalance, we not only improve the predictions of the model as a whole, but also minimize the prediction errors on the female participants and reduce the differences between male and female, like the differences between the predictions on male and female participants. So using a solution as simple as undersampling to balance the data already removes some bias that we could have in the applications. So for this reason, we strongly encourage the community to investigate, for example, conditional models to further take into account the different subgroups that are present in the data set to ensure that the models they're designing are both fair and reliable. And lastly, we also wanted to illustrate how to use the data set to do a more advanced, let's say, analysis than simply discriminating between stressed or not stressed. So we have designed another label for supervised learning that integrates existing psychological studies on stress and combines all the self-assessments we have collected from the participants, such that the label now discriminates between a neutral state, positive response to a stimulus, and an acute stress response to the stimulus. And we have applied the baselines on this, using this for this new task, showing how, like, a beginning of how to use the dataset for discriminating between different types of stress. So this is all for me, and I'm now giving the floor to Maria for the last part of the presentation.
Thank you, Hava. So in this last part, when we are looking at the data sets through the looking glass, we wanted to go in through every detail. So it's typically, everyone think it's a great idea to collect a data set and share it to the community. It is a great idea, but it comes with many painful points that we wanted to share with you. So if one day you embark in this kind of adventure, you keep this in mind. So I don't know if we mentioned before, but we submitted this to the NeurIPS 2023 datasets and benchmark track, and this is our notification of acceptance. Back in the day, we were very happy, and we thought This was it. We had met our ambition of collecting a data set where we wanted to work, but we also wanted to contribute to the community. And so the first lesson learned from this is that this was just the beginning, right? Like the acceptance at Neurips was just the beginning of a very long journey, and not, as we thought at the time, that was just the culmination of it. Why was that? Well, there are many things that we needed to take into consideration, and the first thing is about regulation. So for any European in the webinar, you might be aware of the General Data Protection Regulation that regulates any personal data sharing. We were very careful with that. So we, at the beginning, prepared consent forms just to say everyone was agreeing that their data was going to be collected. This also had to specifically say if they were happy with sharing the data. As Hava mentioned, some people said they didn't want to share the video, so we could collect them, we could use it, but we could not share it, and this was in particular for the video. And with that, we published the paper, and we got our first data request for the lawyers to go and check and said, your consent is not okay. Because due to GDPR regulations in place, every participant needed to be explicit about who they wanted to share the data with. We were very convinced and saying we are fine with sharing the data. It meant to anyone, but no, it did not. So we had to go and chase all these people that had said yes to us to be very specific, saying if they were okay to share it within Europe or like worldwide. Then the second thing we need to take into consideration is that there's a lot of these things around data sharing, which is, if you want something relatively new, it's a kind of problem that at this scale we didn't have 20 years ago, 15 years ago. And the regulation is evolving a lot. So within between when we started this project and up to now, there's many things that have come into place. And one of these is the AI Act in Europe, where they say in this regulation that stress is considered an emotion. And there's a lot of constraints into developing AI systems that will deal with emotions. In principle, it's forbidden. So at some point, it meant that we could not share our database because we were dealing with emotions. Then we managed to discuss with the ethics committee and etc., that for the particular case that we were interested in, which is physiological stress, and see how it deals in patients with ASD, this was not really the case, but it left, let's say, a loophole where an ethics committee will decide. So if you're going to fall into this kind of issue, just be very sure, like from day zero, you discuss with the ethics committee that needs to do your approval to make sure that everyone is on the same page, sorry. So second lesson learned is very careful with the regulations that are in place. And from day zero, make sure you understand all the small letters in all these laws. So we become very, very good friends with the lawyers at our institutions. And so all of this means that there is a very long process to get the data set these days. So we receive the request, we validate that these are real people, so this is for research, so we need to check that they come from a serious or real academic institution. I say real because we do get requests from institutes that do not exist. Once this happens, the requests go to approval. This goes beyond our control, so it's like the data protection officer. There's now some security defense in place from the French government, and if all this goes okay, the contract is signed and everyone is happy. Now, how does this mean if we put again the looking glass into this procedure? So this is a multi-party procedure because it's not just us. As I said, we have to go through a DPO, through some security defense. It's a multi-institutional project, so everyone has to say yes. It makes it very complex, and we don't have control over all of the steps. So at some point, we have just to wait and hope for the best, and it can be very long. So it's been also difficult for us to manage the expectation of the people requesting it because it takes long. We're trying our best because we are learning over the process to make it faster. And I think if you request the data set after our talk, it will be much easier and faster than what it was a couple of months ago. So in the end, what we learn here is that acquiring and collecting might be the easiest part of all this process of releasing a data set. But in the end, lesson learned number 4 is that you definitely need to be resilient and stay positive. After all of this regulatory procedure that we've gone through, in the end, we have a novel multimodal data set that is working, that is focusing on the study of stress. We have delivered an easy to reproduce experimental protocol, and it's there with an open source implementation and detailed instructions of how to use it. We think we have overcome most of the regulations and legal bottlenecks, and so feel free to look at the project page into detail and the GitHub repository if you are interested in using it. So with this, we conclude our talk. We are Maria and Hava, but this is of course not just our work, and there's many people involved in it. So I just want to acknowledge them, and if we are really interested, let me just finish with a small advertisement on working on this data set. We currently have an opening to work specifically on this topic. Thanks a lot for your attention.
Thank you very much for your talk. Feel free in the webinar to ask questions in the chat also. And we can already start with one from Manuel Erens. So you are mentioning the still existing gender bias because of STEM gender bias. How are you considering the bias coming from a university background, moreover from a STEM background? Can this be called StressID, or should it be called STEM StressID? Maybe for this first question.
Yes. So for the first part of this question, how are we considering the bias coming from 100% samples from university? So this was not the goal of our design to select to record only on university students and researchers, but we have recruited everyone on a voluntary basis. So we are based in Sophia Antipolis, that is the scientific pole of in France. It was very hard. Of course, we had about 30% of the participants that were tertiary to STEM, but it was very hard to have a data set that was completely heterogeneous, and the imbalance between female and male was obviously not the only kind of imbalance we had. So as I said, this is unfortunately common in a lot of processes that involve human data collection. And the best we can do is try to take that into account at the development stage by either focusing on subgroups individually, or trying to, for example, working on domain generalization is another field where we can try to ensure that any analysis that we're developing in the data set applies as much as possible to domains that are out of the data set. And I haven't read the rest of the question yet.
Yeah, so to help you with that, he's also asking about how was selecting the
yes,
videos
okay.
for the
And
stress
now about
emergence.
the experimental design. Yes, so all the experiments that we have selected are actually coming from validated sources in psychological studies. So we haven't invented them, they're all commonly used. And because, for example, as I said, we try to use math as a stressor, because not everyone is stressed by math, we try to make them as diverse as possible, using things like public speaking, meaning that for example, in our case, we ask the participants to explain their strengths and weaknesses, trying to emulate the situations of an interview. So yeah, we tried to take as the stressors to be as diverse as possible, specifically for that, to ensure that everyone is at least stressed by something, if not everything.
Maybe if there is more question, maybe one last question in the chat or in the audience.
Can I?
Yeah,
Oh.
sure, go ahead.
Or was there somebody else? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was curious. So, like, thanks for sharing the research and all the lessons learned. So I'm curious, will you write a meta paper about all the data collection and regulation story? Think it would be a good one for the datasets track 2025.
I don't know who will accept it, but it's but I do think, I mean, that's how we try to share the knowledge we have acquired, because it's an internal joke that StressID is a very stressful data set, and but it's half joke, half serious, because we have gone through a lot of these things. Again, I don't see who will accept this as a paper, but the way we try to like share all of this is like when we are invited to present, and we really make sure that people know that there's a lot of things around building a data set and making it public.
Thank you.
I just take the opportunity. So someone asked if the data set is public. Yes. So like I leave the slide there in case you want to like have a look at it.
Yeah, thank you.
Right, thank you. I think with that we can thanks again Hava and Maria for their great talk, and I will pass to Steph now for the second talk.
Thank you very much.